Segons Ogwehoweh, Digwano Haladons, and only Doske, the Sangwat Swat Te Dani, and Ganto, Jidiwa Squahade, Umagahondade, Dano Ganadunyos, G. Wagadara Swio, G. Wagadet Sunny and Dam, Neowada and Kia Trori, Jignahodon Dogon, say, no knocked in the westerns, but got a one ye. Neoni Segon Sconon, Zemono Dunyos. Then only scan ne neo G, nun dis about a jot away, and a gok no way, and dis about dungeon. Tehota'kerá only walks an odom. Ne only Jeremy Green young gets. Go dege, ni de bagenum, ne tonu de bagade yard. Ne yok not ne whiskey morning, yo saraga gina, and a gaunt how what can add that quay. Done what you gathered at ne kickstone. Scott ne jugget eater. Then only Wisni hardy, you can exadayan. Dano umago hondade, gua wandanorum, ne sayada oni sokwa, ye sahes, Oscar, not de hosteriago. Ne not ne torda hagwande, ni hosanodum. My name is Tehota'kerá. My English name is Jeremy Green. I grew up in Tainanega. I've been in Six Nations for about 15 years now. I am a sessional lecturer here at Six Nations Polytechnic in the Ogwehoweh degree program. I've been here 8 years. I also teach in the 3rd year adult Mohawk language immersion program at Ogwehoweh. I am also a PhD student in the Hawaiian and Indigenous language revitalization PhD program at the University of Hawaii at Hilo. Now, the first thing I'm going to tell you about is this Mokuola Honua, Center for Indigenous Language Excellence. And this was started by the Aha Punanaleo board, and there's no building yet. There's the website. They hosted an initial symposium. Now, I happened to be in Hawaii at the same time that the symposium was going on for coursework for my doctorate. So as part of our programming, we were able to attend and listen in to this symposium. And it was held on January 24th to the 26th. And I have to tell you one thing. The Hawaiians really know how to party. They know how to put on an event. Not saying that other people don't. So the first evening we were there were essentially 3 groups of people there. The first group of people were representatives from different programs and schools in the Native American Coalition for Native Language Schools and Programs. And Guwanak Dutta, who is here today, was actually there as one of these representatives. The second body of people who were there were representatives of international funding agencies. So you would think that that's a very clever move on the part of the Hawaiians. And the third group of people were the Hawaiians themselves, specifically the group working with Aha Punanaleo, which are the Hawaiian language preschools, which there are 11 in Hawaii, and they have 3 elementary Hawaiian medium immersion schools throughout the state of Hawaii. To start, the purpose of the symposium was basically, to collaborate, share, to initiate dialogue amongst the participants in 3 key areas: policy, education, and media. And the purpose was to see if there are anything that is duplicable globally. Something that the Hawaiians have done that's common to what the Maori have done, that's common to what they've done in Greenland with their languages, that we can use to help support our language revitalization efforts here at home. And so you see the hook on the picture. So in Hawaii, in Hilo, there's a very small island, Mokuola it's called. And the story goes something like this. I hope I get it right. A long time ago, Maui had set a hook onto all the islands of Hawaii, and he was trying to pull them together. And his brothers who were ahead of him were also helping to pull. And they told him, and they said, don't look back at the island. As Maui pulled, he looked back, and the string broke that held the island with the hook on it, and this one little island stayed there, now where Hilo is. And so this island has special powers. Skona hanatanyahage, doga onkae toayanzage. And so Mokuola refers to this island, and Honua refers to world. So the Hawaiians seek to bring together indigenous people who they have thought of as successful in these areas of language revitalization, particularly policy, education, and media. Here's a map showing where people who were at the symposium actually came from. And here's a more definitive map. The people who were there from the National Coalition of Native American Language Schools and Programs have one central organization nationally that they use to leverage governments, funders, to change policy, and hence the Hawaiians would know who to invite. If we look north of the lakes to what they now call Canada, which we are surrounded by, there is no representation. We're not even on the map. I was there and I signed the little tag, but they didn't put me on their map. I'm not sure why. I think I'm going to ask the next time I'm there. Here's a shot of the people who are there. To prove that I was there, if you look to your top right corner, you can see me, the back row, standing behind a gentleman named Florian Johnson, a Navajo, and this Carl Christian Olsen, who is from Greenland. Goenakdutta is in the front row, standing beside Larry. To get to the point, I want to share with you some of the most important points from my perspective that came out of this symposium. Excuse me. In terms of policy, policy doesn't create change. People on the ground doing the work to revitalize the languages create the change. Policy is used more to solidify the pathway to successful Indigenous language revitalization and also to channel resources to Indigenous language revitalization efforts. And so in Canada, there is no official Languages Act that includes Ogwehoweh people, includes the French. And if you read it, the reason why it's the English and the French, it says because the French and the English are the ones who created Canada. There's one section in that act, Official Languages Act of 1969, which mentions Aboriginal people, and so much to say as this act does not apply to Aboriginal peoples. And in many of these, there were 5 Ogwehoweh people who were there represented. There was Greenland, Norwegian Sami, Hawaiians, Maori from New Zealand, and sorry, I'll get to it. It's written down here somewhere. And so in terms of policy, you can bang the drum all you want and say, we want education in our language, we want this, we want that. But really, if we're not doing the work on the ground, in the homes, in the community, within the programs, then those policy changes aren't going to really amount to much. And so there was a woman there whose name was Dr. Myrna K. Cunningham Kane, who is the chairperson for the Center for Autonomous Development of Indigenous People and board member of the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. And she gave the opening remarks. And one of the things she said is that language rights are linked to self-determination, and they're linked to land rights, hunting and fishing rights. They're in the same classification of all those rights of Ogwehoweh people, and in effect are is a fundamental human right. And so we can turn this idea of our right to speak in our languages as a fundamental human right to be used as a legal mechanism to support the revitalization of our languages. She also made a very good point at the national level. She said that every language revitalization movement needs to have a strategy to target these three levels. Local, which means amongst your own people and nation. National, within the nation state that envelops you or colonized you. And internationally, and this can be between other Ogwehoweh nations. And she said that we can learn to speak our languages, but if we don't change the society that we live in, meaning specifically the oppressive realities that we find ourselves in, then it's imperative to work to change the society that we live in so our languages can fully live and grow and be alive. And she suggested opening a dialogue with state governments, meaning someone here would have to go and talk to Canada about Ogwehoweh language, knowledge, education. And I believe that part of this mandate is now being carried out through the Haudenosaunee Confederacy Council of Chiefs, through their many departments, and also the Indigenous Knowledge Center here at Six Nations Polytechnic. Internationally, a woman named Vicky Towley was there, who is the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And she urged everyone at the international level to use the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, specifically Article 13, which we have the right to speak and transmit our Ogwehoweh languages. Article 14, the right to set up our own educational institutions. And Article 16, to establish and use our own Ogwehoweh media. Now, she also said that the UN Declaration and these articles specifically can be used to put leverage and pressure on state, provincial, national governments to effect policy change in relation to access to resources for Indigenous peoples working to revitalize their languages. In terms of education, accessibility, do we have access to education in our own languages? Do we have control over our own systems of education? Control is critical. In one of my classes, we have Dr. Pila Wilson, is my main professor for most of my coursework at the University of Hawaii at Hilo, and he said something very profound. He said, power is more important than money. If you have power over your Indigenous language revitalization effort, then the resources will come. So work to establish power and control. And it was a sentiment echoed by several others at the Symposium that movements through educational institutions to revitalize Ogwehoweh languages need strong leaders. The ones who are leading the charge need to be the ones who either speak the language or who have become speakers of the language, because they know what it takes to create users and speakers of Ogwehoweh languages. Also being said, and I having experienced it firsthand in Hawaii, that any educational institution achieving excellence, the administrators speak the Ogwehoweh language, their administration and their help speak the Ogwehoweh language, all the teachers speak the Ogwehoweh language, the maintenance staff speak the Ogwehoweh language. And it creates the space where the language is alive. In Hawaii, at the Kehaka'ula o Keolekalani Language College, you walk in there, they speak to you in Hawaiian. And it's just an amazing experience. And I had to take a second language, Hawaiian language course as part of my studies, so I was forced to use it. Leanne had mentioned creating users of the language just by having this space, this post-secondary institution, this amazingly beautiful building. You're basically forced to use Alelo Hawaii there. Create your own curriculum, which I think many of us here are doing. Your staff are highly proficient speakers of your language. One of the main issues and difficulties and challenges across all 5 of those major language groups was lack of teachers. Lack of teachers who were proficient enough in the Ogwehoweh language to actually last a whole day in a classroom, let alone a whole year. And the second part of that were actually professionally trained or accredited or recognized licensed teachers. In the case of the Maori in New Zealand, which I'm going to get to in a couple of minutes, it kind of highlights the difficulty with not having trained teachers who can speak Maori enough to actually transmit the language in the classroom. Nationally, in terms of, well, one other thing locally, and I really witnessed this in Hawaii, I was able to observe for 2 weeks at Navahi, which is the Hawaiian medium elementary immersion school, also high school. And I was there for 2 weeks, and they seek academic excellence while developing speaking proficiency of their students using their culture and knowledge as the foundation. Amazing to see. Very inspiring. Nationally, establish your child's right to be educated in their Ogwehoweh language and open channels for resources to flow. And when they talked about education, there is a literacy program here. I just saw Michelle Davis yesterday, and she said we're trying to get money channeled through here for literacy programs in our Ogwehoweh languages. So just because money or resources are directed at something that may not say Indigenous language revitalization, these 5 successful or excellent language groups throughout the world find ways and means to channel resources from any and all funding organizations to support their language revitalization efforts. This just does not include regional, state, or national governments, but also international bodies as well. Internationally, they suggested collaboration for mutual support, WINHEC, this Mokuola, Honua, etc. In terms of media, we saw from Zoe how media can be used for entertainment purposes, how it can be used for learning. And there was a man there named Donald Campbell, and he's the CEO of MG Alba, or BBC Alba, which is the Scottish Gaelic television network. They have 7 hours daily of Gaelic language television programming on a national network. They've used that platform to support local language revitalization efforts. The one thing that they've done I found very interesting is they host an annual film festival. 75 short films per year in the Gaelic language are submitted to this short film competition. Now they have hundreds and hundreds of these short films available online, which they also host a website where any learner of Gaelic can go on and watch these hundreds and hundreds of videos all in the Gaelic language. They also host a other website, learngaelic.scot. If you want to check it out, you can. Again, similar to what Zoe had just shown, except for the Scottish language. To tell our own stories in our own languages, to motivate people to work towards speaking our Ogwehoweh languages. And the most important thing I heard there was that to build a ladder of opportunity for our young people. This means that not everyone, every child who goes through an immersion program is going to be a teacher of Ogwehoweh Neha. Maybe that child is sitting there and they're watching, saying, hey, I want to make movies like Zoe. That's pretty cool what she did. I want to do that. Another boy might sit there and think, oh, I love building cars. I'm going to learn how to build cars, but I'm going to speak Kunyangeha. So one of the ways in Scotland, they're trying to use the media to motivate people to direct them into Gaelic media, and building that as a way to support their Ogwehoweh languages. And if we look here, excellence in Indigenous language revitalization. The 5 groups, Hawaiian, Maori, Scottish Gaelic, Norwegian Sami, and Greenland. Official state recognition. This means policy developed at the national or state level to support and recognize their movements. All yes. The documents, they've all gone about it in different ways. Some have pressured state governments to make constitutional amendments, such as the Hawaiians. The Maoris used a court challenge under the Treaty of Waitangi, claiming that the government of New Zealand was violating the Treaty of Waitangi and that they weren't promoting the Maori language enough. And later it formed the Waitangi Tribunal, which hears cases brought against the government of New Zealand in terms of violations of this Treaty of Waitangi, which frames all relations between the Ogwehoweh people, Maori people of New Zealand, and the New Zealand state government. Sami Act. Greenland actually has, written in the Danish Constitution, the right to secede from Denmark. Yet they haven't. They slowly progressed towards home rule from what was called self-government. Very interesting case there as well. Their annual language budget, look at those numbers. Official recognition of your language as an official recognition of your state brings with it many things. One of the things it brings is Owista. It is money, everything. We would think that's excellent. The amount of resources that are directed towards these Indigenous language revitalization programs. If we look at political status, they're all citizens of the nation states whom envelop them. Total population and number of speakers. If you look at these two columns, number of speakers in Hawaii, New Zealand for the Maori, Norwegian Sami, census, self-reported census data. For Maori New Zealand, can hold a conversation on day-to-day topics. Oh, I can say Sego, I can say Ona, I can say Nyawa, I'm going to check that. In Hawaii, the actual cited number of speakers by speakers themselves, they say is approximately 1,000. 60 of these are on the island of Niihau. 40 of these are Niihauans who moved to the island of Kauai recently. The other 900 are second language speakers of Hawaiian who have been created through their, I consider, very successful second language programs. So they are replacing more speakers than they are losing, and to me, that's success. And they're also having couples or parents who speak to their children from birth in the home, and those kids speak Hawaiian. I was there, I saw it, it was Guachi yesterday. What this points to is when we say excellence in education, policy, and media, what exactly do we mean? In the case of the Maori in New Zealand, number of speakers self-identified, 125,000. Those are people who have participated in any Maori language program. Does that mean they are highly proficient speakers of Maori? Numbers can be used to manipulate, to gain access to resources, to gain recognition. It's a tool that Indigenous language organizations can use to acquire resources. So we look at the annual language budget column. If we're realistic, and the Maoris were very realistic, Judge Karen Fox, who's a deputy judge on the Waitangi Tribunal, in her presentation asked the question, revitalization or not? I remember being in my master's course studies in 2005 and hearing all about the Maori and how amazing their programs are and all the speakers they're creating. And look, there's 100,000 of them in the census data. But really, she said, we're still losing more speakers than we are gaining. And I almost fell off my chair. 225 million New Zealand dollars spent. So what's the difficulty here? What's the problem? They have schools, immersion schools, hundreds of them. Daycares, hundreds of them. Universities, all these things here they have the political recognition. So what's going wrong? If we look here, the Kahanga Reo are the language immersion preschools. 1982, when they started, they had no official government recognition of Maori as the official language of the state. You can see the exponential growth. The Maori Language Act was passed in 1987, recognizing Maori as an official language of the state. In 1990, Karen Fox said that the responsibility for Maori language education passed from the Ministry of Maori Affairs to the Minister of Education. And that is where the Maori effectively lost grassroots control over their Indigenous language revitalization movements. And you can see the number of centers declining. What effectively happened was the government said, okay, we recognize the Maori language as the official language of the state. Anyone that asks to have their children educated in the Maori language, we're going to make it happen for them wherever they are. So the government has $225 million set aside for Maori language programs, but if 2, 3, 10 children at one inner city elementary school say, we want Maori language for our children, then they get the money, take some of that money that was going to the grassroots initiatives and direct it to these mainstream elementary schools to offer what are essentially native second language programs. So in a study that the Waitangi Tribunal conducted several years ago, they found that Maori children can be successful if they're immersed in the language 50 to 100% of the time. Most of the money now today of this $225 million is directed towards programs where children are exposed to 20% or less Maori language per day. So this is the reason that they're attributing lack of actual speakers being created through their programs. And so also in the Sami, I want to read this to you. There's a lack of documentation in how many people can actually speak Sami. They estimate 25,000 speakers in Norway. Interestingly, where it says elders fluent orally, the younger people read and write better. The language is weak orally. So one of the things that came out in the education component of this symposium was that many schools focus, and language programs focus more on what the building should look like. Where will our retreat be? What kind of wonderful curriculum materials can we make? Instead of actually focusing on the content of their programming and creating some kind of mechanism, as Gete had mentioned, that we can use internationally to discuss what is a quote-unquote speaker of an Indigenous language. What is excellence in achieving this? So all of these things are being discussed at this symposium. It's Mokuola Honua Center for Indigenous Language Excellence. In the future, there was talk about expanding to include Indigenous language excellence in the family. If we look at this here, we can say that these nations of Ogwehoweh people have achieved, they've opened the channels for resource flow. They've achieved the political recognition that they need to move forward. And you can hear some of the issues that came out there. Great lessons for us moving forward. In closing, I'm not going to have time to get to the other part of my presentation that I wanted to share with you. And I hope in the future, Mokuola Honua will work towards defining essentially what's a speaker? That they would actually define that. What does that mean? If I have 5 minutes, I'm going to move quickly to my other presentation. Does anybody know how do I make this? Can you just make that bigger in the slideshow thing? Through our experiences here at Six Nations, Ogwehoweh, Tainanega, in creating and building second language learners of our languages, we've come across a very specific process for how that can happen. Here are some numbers from Mohawk speakers at Six Nations. The Woodland Cultural Center in 1994 put out a 74-name list. Well, I grabbed my friend, and I said, he's an elderly man from here, and I said, say Andy again. And he spoke a little bit of Kyoga, and he says, oh, aha. And he starts looking through the list, and he goes, dead, 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 don't speak, dead, dead. We went through the whole list. We found 6. He took me house to house. He goes, oh, no, that's my cousin. We'll go see her, he says. Speaker numbers here. 0.001% of the population here can speak Ginyanggeha at a level high enough to ensure intergenerational transmission of Ginyanggeha in the home, from birth to the children, from the parents. or to teach effectively in Mohawk language immersion education. Through some research here, further research, graduates of Ogwehoweh superior down. 5 superior speakers have been created since 1998, 14 advanced, 60 plus in the mid-range. The blue star marks where we need to go to create people who are proficient enough to teach in immersion schools effectively or programs and to raise children with Ogwehoweh as their first language. I'm going to keep going down here. I have 3 minutes left. At Six Nations, these are some of the things that we do today for the Mohawk language. I was invited to go to Alaska, to the Alaska Native Language Summit, and present on Mohawk language revitalization, and specifically adult immersion programming. So I talked about many of you in the room, your programs, visited your websites, creeping around. We have second language programs, like at OMSK. If you look at the hours, it's very important here, the contact time required to create fluent speakers of the language. The Ogwehoweh Language Diploma Program with the contact hours estimated about intermediate low. The degree program, we've set the target here at intermediate mid. In Hawaii, just to get into their teacher education program, you have to pass 6 language tests, an active full OPI, and speak at the advanced low level just to get into their teacher education program. They demand excellence, and therefore they get it. What else do we have? Ogwehoweh. If we look at this graphic here, generally after the 2 years, Ogwehoweh did an assessment of all the graduates of his program, and he had them do a self-assessment of where they would place themselves on this active fill OPI, the cone. And intermediate mid. Look at the contact hours, 1,800 hours over 2 years, just to get almost to the advanced level. So this picture here is very important. Currently, we are actually replacing more speakers than we are losing of Mohawk here at Six Nations. Not a lot of people know that. Yes. Is that not success? We think back to the language map of the groups that were invited. We're not on the map, but we could be, right, Larry? Right. We have some families here who are graduates of Ogwehoweh second language program. You look at the couple in the middle, first Ganyotgeha speaking child in Tyndonega in over 70 years. It could be longer than that. Six Nations, my oldest son, first language speaking child here in 50 years. And if we read through some of these stories, you're going to find some commonalities. Elementary Mohawk immersion, self-study, attendance at longhouse ceremonies, feasts. Over on the other side, Mohawk immersion at Gowaneo. Resides with the Ganyotgeha speaker. Second language immersion program I was in for 13 years. So everything that we're doing in Six Nations through educational institutions and programs, we've been working for 46 years now to revitalize Ganyotgeha. Started in 1970 with 2 teachers at what's now J.C. Hill School. Ruth Isaacs, I believe, for Ganyotgeha, and Hubert Skye for Cayuga. NSL classes. 46 years now, and these are some of the kind of results that we're getting. You take a quick look at this. The important part are the hours. To actually be engaged in a second language learning and teaching environment, meaning specific language instruction. This does not refer to content instruction, which I'm going to differentiate. Where the star is where we need to go. 2,700 hours base. This is the last thing I want to show you, and then we can eat, because you only got them gardyaks. That's what, Danny. Garda Queensland, you go harder. Okay, so we look at the cone. There are certain teaching methods and learning methods and approaches that match with these various levels of the active fill speaking proficiency scale we see here. The first level novice, level of words. For our polysynthetic languages, the very first thing they're doing at Ogwehoweh is teaching learners how to build and manipulate words through the morphemes of the Mohawk language. That accelerates the learning tenfold. If you had to spend that amount of time with a first language speaker, you would not learn the grammar at first. It would take you years and years and years to figure out the grammar. At Ogwehoweh, year 1 and 2, they use the grammar translation method specifically. It gives you a base to work with. You can survive in any language domain where you find yourself in contact with speakers. You may not have all the very fine articulate vocabulary that you need, but you have the structures down, the syntax, you know how to build words, you know how to express yourself. And as you progress through the number of hours, communicative approach, task-based learning, you learn how to talk about very specific things in your Ogwehoweh language. The farther you progress, we place the Master Apprentice program more as like a finishing program to you see the numbers of how many speakers we have here. It's just not possible to run a Master Apprentice program for the hundreds of people wanting to learn to speak in Ogwehoweh. So we can do something like this. For children, we take these approaches and flip them around, starting in primary. Brian's program, Wanadeka's program, is only 2 years, and they're running a 3rd year for this year. They need 4 years. Someone give them some money to run a 4-year program. In Hawaii, they're very clever. 1 to 4, they've worked into their Hawaiian Studies degree program, and they use these approaches. I sat there for 2 weeks watching the courses in class, watching what they do. And Six Nations Polytechnic degree program, we realistically do something very similar. I look forward to having the opportunity to work on this in the coming days ahead. In conclusion, the last 46 years here at Ohsweken specifically, I think we've actually accomplished quite a lot. I've only been here since maybe 2001. Everyone that works in some way to revitalize our Ogwehoweh languages is to thank. And I think it's time that we recognize one another for all of our efforts. And I'm going to encourage everyone. I've seen something in Hawaii where the same people who taught at the language college also taught at the elementary school, also taught at the preschool, also sat on this board, that board. There was no, I'm not going over there because I don't want to work with that person. They combined their minds together to work for the betterment of their Ogwehoweh language. And none of their language programs are an individual, a family, or an organization's legacy. They created this language revitalization movement of which all their people belong, and from that place is where they take their action, and from that place is where I actually seen real power. Gazatstontsra, we call it. It was amazing. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. And dogari dadawatska daito.